Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
that's taken from the Guardian.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said he told the Nelk boys that that's not true.
Yeah, I don't think Netanyahu could tell the truth if he wanted to. Did you see that quote by Cardinal Pizzaballa, who's a Latin patriarch of Jerusalem? He said that something along the lines of the Holy Land where Christ walked is the it's the historical source of the Christian religion, and it has like a great spiritual significance to Christians, but that Satan seeks dominance of the Holy Land, and all that is good and pure in the Holy Land is equally opposed by the satanic forces arrayed against it. The power of the satanic forces arrayed against it. So it's official. The Catholic Church considers the Israeli military a satanic force doing the billing of the Dark Lord.
I mean, that's just objectively, at this point, it's fairly obvious.
That is objectively true. There is no way that one can dispute that, and any attempts to do so are just cope. Moving on, Lindsey Graham has given up on his 500% bone-crushing sanctions on America's biggest trading partners and allies.
Well,
So
because you need
biggest
a
trading
700%.
partners like China, and then allies like India, for trading with Russia. He now wants to declare Russia a terrorist state for reportedly kidnapping 19,000 Ukrainian children. Interestingly enough, this was recently addressed in the ongoing Istanbul negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Russia agreed to return the children to Ukraine and asked for a list of children. And even though Ukraine has at one point claimed, tens of thousands of children have been kidnapped, when Russia agreed to return them and asked for a list, Ukraine turned over a list of 300 children, to which Russia said, yeah, sure, we'll find them and send them back.
Yeah, but 10,000 sounds a lot better.
19,000 is what Lindsey Graham claims, and I think that's the charge filed against him in the ICC was for something like 20,000 children.
Oh, does that mean that we recognize the ICC now?
Not exactly. Yeah, but like what Russia says about this is that these children were primarily orphans or displaced children that have been separated from their parents, and they were placed in orphanages or with families in Russia. And this is, that's what they claim. I don't know the truth of this. The only information that I've seen are Russia saying, yeah, we're just trying to keep these endangered children away from the front lines and give them homes. And they have reportedly returned children to the Ukrainians that have been requested by the parents or family of Ukrainians. And they have done that with some. Like, the Ukrainians admit that the Russians have sent some kids back, but not enough. And, they're claiming that the Russians give them the runaround on returning children sometimes. But anyway, so all of this is to acknowledge that there is a process for returning children. And it kind of makes it hard for me to believe that Russia just goes about abducting Ukrainian children for no reason and sending them back. Because what would the purpose of that even be? According to the Ukrainians, it's to genocide the Ukrainians.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's to be evil. That's what it means to be a Russian, is to sit around in a dark room and drink vodka and say, what is an evil thing that we can do today? How do we make it more evil outside?
Yeah, I don't doubt that there are some like abuses of the system, like maybe some Ukrainian children get taken to Russia and put with a family, and then those families refuse to give them up, and Russia is just like, yeah, sure, I don't see why we should, go out of our way to help these Ukrainians out, which I think that's terrible, but I could conceive of something like that happening. But anyway, that's
it's not always an Elian Gonzalez style case.
Yeah. So let's move on to the Anchorage summit, because Lindsey Graham saying that he wants to declare Russia a terrorist state comes alongside the Anchorage summit, because it seems as though relations between Putin and Trump, or Russia and the United States, are on the path towards normalization, and Lindsey Graham can't have that. He wants to declare Russia a terrorist state, which means that anyone who did business with Russia would be doing business with terrorists. So, Trump couldn't negotiate with them. Any country in the world that did business with them would be put themselves in the United States' legal military crosshairs. So the United States could invade them, bomb them, seize their ships, do whatever.
Well, but also it's only the BRICS, That's all. You could just go to war with all the BRICS.
Except for that the United States trades with Russia. Europe is still trading with Russia. It's all bullshit. This is all fucking bullshit political theater. So the White House meeting with not White House meeting, the summit meeting in Anchorage between Putin and Trump really did sort of change the narrative, as we discussed. Just to sum up, the idea of the United States demanding that Russia declare a ceasefire or opt for a ceasefire with Ukraine while peace negotiations got started has been dropped. I think that it doesn't make any sense for Russia to agree to a ceasefire that would allow Ukraine to regroup, rearm, train soldiers, get money from the West, get weapons from the West, and try to shore up their positions. This is exactly what happened with the Minsk agreements when the forces of the separatists in the Donbass had completely surrounded and were about to annihilate the Ukrainian military, and Angela Merkel negotiated a ceasefire, and then the Ukrainians were able to pull back from being encircled and annihilated, and then sign the Minsk agreements, which the Ukrainians immediately disregarded and went back on the offensive against separatists in the Donbass. So
even by the admission of the, let's say the collective West, which is even by their own admission, the whole point of the ceasefire was to rearm and prepare for a new military.
Right.
What is it called? I was going to say adventure. But yeah, sure, a new military adventure.
A new offensive against the separatists in the Donbass.
Yeah.
So Angela Merkel admitted as much in a book. Boris Johnson admitted as much a couple of months ago in an interview that he did on Sky News or something like that. And of course, the Americans and the foreign policy establishment have admitted it. Sarkozy admitted it. So everyone knows that's what it was. And so from that meeting between Trump and Putin came the United States dropping that demand, and therefore dropping the threats to put secondary sanctions on anyone that traded with Russia. And so for the first time, that has gone out the window, and there is now an open dialogue between the two heads of state, and the things are back on track for a opening of diplomatic relations between Russia and the United States. So the Europeans hated this idea, and they rushed to the White House to meet with Trump. And I think that this meeting was basically just the dog walking of Zelensky and the European leaders, and forcing them to verbally kowtow to Trump while actually conceding nothing. It was just a humiliation ritual that led to absolutely no tangible results. So for the first time, though, Kiev and Europe agreed to discuss the war based on, quote, the realities on the ground rather than wishful thinking.
Which is probably not a bad idea to do sometimes, when you're dealing with a war. Sometimes you have to at least do a thought experiment and an exercise where you only consider the realities on the ground.
So this is what they agreed to in the meeting, right? They also agreed to NATO, to set aside the idea of NATO membership, and to contemplate Yeah, and how to stomach territorial concessions, right? So these are all the things that the Europeans and Zelensky agreed to in this meeting. So it looked like they were moving themselves closer to Trump's idea of what should happen to end the war.
But then they remember that Sergei Lavrov came to Alaska with a USSR hoodie on.
So this article that I read was by Thomas Fazzi, and he says that these are his takeaways for the symbolism and significance of what happened here. He says, like I've been saying, that Alaska meeting reestablished U.S.-Russia dialogue. The red carpet welcome that Putin got helped break the political isolation of Russia, which I think never existed because it was not isolated at all from the entire global South or the BRICS nations or whatever. And he also says this was a political victory for Moscow because it exposed the West's failure to pin Russia down with sanctions and isolation. And he says that Russia has emerged stronger, deepened ties with China and the global South, and the idea of Trump shaking hands with Putin means that Trump acknowledged that Russia remains a power to be reckoned with and is not a pariah state that can be just ignored or bullied into submission. And it also during the summit, the Europeans and the West. During the summit, the West has effectively admitted that it has lost the war. Europe and Ukraine have effectively admitted that they cannot take back territory from Russia militarily, and they've admitted that a negotiated settlement is the only option.
Well, just to be clear, though, Russia is still isolated from like the world community. It's just that there are very few countries in the world community. So from the other countries, which is say the community of countries in the world, they're not isolated. But from the world community, yes, very much isolated.
So once this meeting was over, everyone goes back to their own countries. The Europeans affirm that Ukraine is on track to join NATO and that Europe is going to do everything they can to help the Ukrainians regain the territory of the 1991 borders. Zelensky says that Ukraine refuses to cede a single inch of territory to Russia and that it refuses demands such as restoring Russian language to full legal status with Ukrainian language and to unban Russian TV stations and radio stations and to unban political parties that represented Russian speakers and to unban the Ukrainian Orthodox Church that is tied to the Patriarchate of Moscow. So basically, Zelensky just doubled down on the intransigence. As if Russia wasn't encroaching steadily on Ukrainian territory and that its military wasn't degrading and coming closer and closer to collapse every single day.
Yeah, like at this point, I feel like one has to ask the question of like what on earth is going on? Like, how is this even possible? And it's got to be that Zelensky either cannot recognize this because he's unable to because political or even physical threats, or genuinely just incapable of looking outside and reading the reality on the ground.